Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. I met our guest today in Colorado. Last year, it was October, and we were filming for Psychedelica Season 2 on Gaia.com. This is the second season of a very intensive project that's all about psychedelics, the future of consciousness, shamanism, things like that. His name is Rashad Anton Evans. He's a retired mixed martial artist, the heavyweight winner of the Ultimate Fighter #2, UFC former Light Heavyweight Champion, and in 2019, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Since then, he was in Psychedelica Season 2. You're really going to want to check that out. And you're going to want to check out his Joe Rogan podcast and what he's been up to lately, because from the highlights that you'll see back then to where he's going right now, he's stepping into an incredible new direction. And I can't wait to bring him up on the Ben Stewart Podcast. All right, welcome back. Yo, Rashad, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How about you, Ben?
Doing really well, man. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. We got Gordo going on up here as well.
Gordo, what's up, man? What's going on, Gordo?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Right on. Yeah, so, man, I mean, I said a little bit in the intro, but we met last October. We got to go to Gaia together. That was really cool. Then we went off into the mountains to find ourselves. And here we find ourselves now on this podcast talking about some really cool directions that you've been taking since the UFC. But before we launch right into that, I really want to know, like, just a core fundamental thing with you was what led to your profession being professional fighting?
After I graduated from college at Michigan State, I was looking to find myself. I competed in wrestling, but didn't compete to my level, that I felt like I could have. I was kind of spotty in my college career as far as performances. So I wanted to just really compete in something where I can just like get it all out. Like I felt like I can get it all out. And that's when I ran into a guy who was doing, at the time, it was called NHB, No Holds Bar, in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan. And, we started training, and it was just a few of us at the time. And it wasn't nothing more than just like a real life fight club. So we would just train together, beat each other up. And after a while, I was like, man, I want to actually get into a fight. So then I started fighting these smokers, which is just like a small show where people like smoking cigarettes. That's why they call it smokers. They're smoking cigarettes or cigars. And it's like usually like in a bingo hall or something like that. And, there's no commission, and you go in there and you fight. So that's how I got my start in mixed martial arts. It was just on the heels of a heartbreaking wrestling career.
Oh, no way, man. Okay. Yeah. So like growing up, was there, I mean, for me, I was watching a lot of wrestling and things along those lines when I was growing up. Was that a part of your upbringing, or was it more like outdoors just with your friends?
It was, I watched a lot of pro wrestling, but for the most part, like I was just, we were getting it in the grass a lot of times, just wrestling, and we had a big neighborhood of kids, and it was, survival of the fittest, man. We really, we really tested each other, and when we were training, not even training, we just like playing how we were playing. After a while, we got really, really good. So I became a good natural wrestler, and when I got my opportunity, like I think it was like in 7th grade, we had like the high school wrestling coach come and coach our gym class to show us some wrestling. And I did really, really good. So he was like, "Oh, what's your name?" And so then he had me come out to the wrestling training and JV wrestling training. And then after that, he kind of pulled me in.
Nice, nice. Haven't been somebody who like been in, a couple street fights, but never like looked to actually go for somebody who could really punch me in the face and do some damage. When you got your first knock, was there any moment like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this? When you got your first good knock hit on you, was there any moment where you were like, this ain't my path? Or did it just not faze you? Because I could imagine that would be the moment where I'm like, all right, I want to pick up my guitar again.
Yeah, when I got hit for the first time, it didn't make me feel like I didn't want to do it. It actually made me feel like this is exactly what I want to do. I actually had the opposite feeling. I was like, yeah, this is it, because at that point, once I got hit, everything became so much more real. It's almost like time slowed down, and I was like in a state of mind that I really never been before, because I'd never really been that present as I was competing, and it was just like it was something that it was like out of a movie, when they throw a punch, the punch is going by really, really slow because the adrenaline was so much that it just like time, it just like slowed down as if like you're in a car accident. And it was just such an addicting feeling because I had never felt that present before. So when that first punch hit me, I'm just like, ooh, this is it.
Yeah. So talk about an unrehearsed but awesome segue into psychedelics. You talk about like a moment, something like getting hit in the face where the stakes are super high, and you take that moment and it alters your perspective. It slows down time. Did you have any of these kinds of experiences later on when you I don't want to go through the whole litany of, like you started with, I think it was 5-MeO, was it?
Yeah.
Or maybe started with, okay, and then psilocybin. Did you ever have like a parallel between that moment and like the altered state and the states and the stakes and the things that you had to kind of face once you started exploring other frames of consciousness like psychedelics?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of those moments where I would just kind of see, or just kind of not even see, but just kind of feel that familiar feeling that I felt before, where it was just like, it was as if like I was in a higher consciousness self, state, because whenever you have to fight and it's almost like, it's your time to take that walk, or, it's the night before the fight and all these thoughts come into your mind, there's pieces of you that kind of like, you're so fragmented and you're riding this emotional roller coaster. And at that time, there's so many different feelings and perspectives that you're having. And some of that feeling and perspective, it's almost like a higher self, like an out of body experience at times. And when I've done psychedelics on a few occasions, I felt that same feeling. That's why psychedelics to me is kind of a familiar feeling in respects where it's that feeling of just dialing in, like if I'm just like super focused.
That's interesting. So at what point did this come in? I mean, I assume it was after you left the UFC, when you started kind of going off on these journeys. Like, take me through some of the steps that led you, because ultimately I met you through Del Jolly at Unlimited Sciences. And take me through some of the steps that led you up to meeting Del and kind of the interesting direction that you two are taking to really use this incredible story that you built for yourself and shift it on its heels. Like if your life were a movie, it would be, at least at this point, a twist in the plot, a really interesting one. So could you take me through some of the steps that led you up to meeting Del and what you guys are on to now?
Yeah. So I met Del about a year and a half before I retired fighting in 2018. And prior to retiring, I was struggling. I was struggling with competing. I was struggling with just, that space that I've become so familiar with as a fighter. in the space where I enjoyed fighting from, because it's such a test, such a mental test, and it's such a test to just for the spirit when you have to do a fight. So every time that I would do a fight, I would like it because there's so many gains on a personal level, and I felt like I grew as a person. But in my last few fights, I just couldn't feel that connection with myself like I was in previous years, and I just wanted to get to the bottom of it. And I was kind of searching, and I started to just kind of reach out in different kind of ways. And Dell I made a post on Instagram, and it made Dell like, wait a minute, this dude is searching for something. It made him just question where my mindset was for a second, and then he just threw me a text and was like, hey man, what's going on? And then he started telling me about this medicine, and I was like, and it just kind of seemed exactly where I was at, because he was talking about how it was just completely life changing for him. And at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted out of life. I've been so successful in fighting, and I was successful in other areas of my life, but now I was just feeling like I was hitting that point in the road where I never hit before, because it was always a smooth transition into my next thing in life. And here I was nearing the end of my career, but I wasn't feeling like I was near the end, and I definitely didn't know where I wanted to go afterwards. So it was just like this point in my life where I was, in a state of just being lost in a sense. And that's when I met Dale, and that's when I met the medicine.
So did you, just even calling it a medicine, like you'd heard of psychedelics before, did you ever think of them in terms of medicines, or did you kind of have the old school Ronald Reagan, like a drug is a drug, if it's illegal, you shouldn't take it?
Well, I was afraid of psychedelics, to be honest, and I definitely didn't call it medicine. I was afraid of psychedelics, and I thought like if I did it, then something would happen. Like I would get stuck, and I would be like one of those people who become schizophrenic or have some kind of other mental disorders that happens, and I was kind of afraid of it. But after really getting familiar, doing some research on it, and really just trying to understand it from a couple of different perspectives, I kind of started to grow more comfortable to the idea that it won't, mess me up for life, and it may be something that I can use to figure some things out. But at first, when I was first thinking about it, it was a scary process, to be honest.
I'm sure, man. I mean, like, so for me, I think it was my early 20s when I first heard of it. That went from like a recreational thing that you did, that I started when I was 14. So I had already had a relationship with them. And then all of a sudden I was asked to come down to the jungle and experience this medicine. And this was ayahuasca, in a traditional setting with indigenous. And, like in the middle of the jungle, you're hearing the jungle, you're literally sitting right there doing this medicine that comes from there, hearing these songs that come from, like obviously this land that I was in, but for me, a far off land. And it didn't raise any alarm bells, even though I was hyper vigilant. And when I thought of it as a medicine, it really made me start looking at like, how much wisdom is actually out there, and like what kind of plants are even out there. The fact that you can have these kinds of experiences, and that they make long lineages of singing songs and bringing the medicine to the people for very specific reasons of opening consciousness, healing trauma, bringing the tribe together. That was a big shift in my life. So what was it for you? Because I know you started with 5-MeO, and there really isn't a super long tradition. They're the Hohokam Indians, I believe, but they didn't even, it's debatable to whether they even knew about the psychoactive or psychedelic part of the toad. So like for you, when did maybe the ceremony side start stepping in? What was it? Was it 5-MeO, or was it something beyond that?
It was a 5-MeO for me, because the way we did it, it was a group of us, and we had a shaman and everything. But where we did it was just absolutely beautiful. It was in the mountains in Colorado, and a buddy of ours had like a cabin like way up in the mountains, and it was kind of just secluded. And we had a nice group of people that, before we did the medicine, we stated our intentions and we shared with each other what brought us to the mountain. What was that thing that brought us to the mountain? And, just like all the other circles I'll soon to find out, the circle, just sitting in a circle, that sharing, the ceremony, as it's called sometimes, it was the most impactful part for me because a lot of times, I would say what I was feeling, but I would listen to other people and listen to where they were coming from, and listen to the things that, was going on in their lives that brought them to the mountain. And there was such a strong resonating factor with some of the things that was coming out of their mouth, as if it was like my own words and my own emotions. So hearing how they were able to face it and the perspective that they took, facing their problems, it gave me a foothold, and it gave me the kind of the verbiage or the kind of understanding or the perspective that I need to start that conversation with myself on a subject matter like they may have had in their life. So that was when I really stepped into it. And I really felt as if, like, once I had that experience with the group, it allowed me to embrace the medicine that much more.
Yeah, man. So would you say vulnerability was something that, like, the medicine introduced to you? Because I would imagine in like, UFC, you're facing the most dangerous people, well-trained people in the world. Vulnerability, it would be probably the end of your life. Like, so where does that word and that force of vulnerability kind of play in this whole timeline?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At the time, being vulnerable was like one of the things that I was really having a hard time to do. Like, I like to say, up until that time, I was like emotionally constipated, where it was just a blockage of just emotion, and I really couldn't get to, where the blockage was to unblock it. And once I was there, and once, I experienced the medicine and I experienced the ceremony and everything that went along with it, it was just like a flood of emotion just busted open, like a dam has just been broke open, to the point where, I even became a little hypersensitive a bit. I would cry at the drop of a dime, and it was just, it was like, emotionally, I was unclogged with that thing that was caught me blocked up. But it just felt good to be able to let out the emotion and not carry it around like I was before. And it just allowed me to feel freer than I felt in a long time at that point.
Yeah. It's super interesting. The medicine did very similar things for me. And, so, like, just to be careful for the audience, the medicine isn't the only thing I credit to this part of my journey. There's a lot of context that had to lead up to it. But for me, I come from a long line of military people. My dad, all the way back, his father before him, all the way back to, the Civil War, probably the Revolutionary War is what I remember hearing. Every single male Stewart was in the military, going all the way back there. So that's a lot of, like, that's a heavy lineage, if you will. And that's just self-defense on a different level. And I think of it in terms of archetypes. Like, there's something about that archetypal, like, if you're military, you're like a warrior in a sea of warriors. That's how we like to think of it. And then there's also the archetype that probably a lot of that comes from, or is the more individual side of it, which is the one that you kind of embodied quite a bit more. The warrior, but the solo warrior, like, like what most people's worst nightmare would be stepping into a closed cage with the most highly trained person that's literally trying to knock you out, with only one other person that could be on your side, if you're in danger. And to me, I think about, like, the archetype of the warrior, and, like, is that still there for you? Did it just kind of transmute itself from one level to the next? Like, is the warrior still there, or is it gone and you're on to something different? What do you feel?
The warrior's still here. I do a lot of training now. Like, I have a bunch of guys now that I train, professional athletes I train in fighting. So the warrior's still there, and I get after it still. Like, I go into those dark training sessions where it's like, all right, guys, nobody look at the clock and nobody ask me when it's done. We're just going to be done when we're done, like that kind of mindset, that I can still go there, but I'm able to leave it there, and I'm able to just go as hard as I can, let it all out, and just leave it there. And as before, I wasn't able to leave it there. Like I wasn't able to leave all of it and just and then get back to my normal life. It got to the point where there was no separating me as a fighter. I just became a fighter all the time, and that served a purpose. But after a while, that started to bleed off into my life and really started to mess with the relationships that I had, because as a fighter, you have to be very selfish. You have to be, look out what you got, what's coming on the horizon. And you always have to make sure that you're doing what's best for yourself and getting ready for the next competition. So it really doesn't leave a lot of room for other people. And, learning how to have balance, learning how to being able to engage that warrior, but then at the same time, leave the warrior in the gym and then come out and wear my other hats without a problem. That's what I've learned now. And that's what it's been helping me out so much now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like stepping out of confines of a role that we placed ourselves in.
Right.
So I'm curious, like, how much has either the archetype of the warrior or like even specific moments in the ring? I mean, this is coming from like a non-fighter in that respect. I would, and I know a lot of other people would probably have the same question. Have you had to face yourself in a medicine experience in some way? Whether, I mean, I'm not saying like, you happen to be back in the ring and it's you're fighting, but like have aspects of that role that you played for so long come up in medicine and had to like communicate or something that you had to engage with there that was kind of maybe a seed was planted in you long ago?
Yeah, like I've had the feeling, like when you fight, there's a feeling of you don't want to lose, and that feeling of annihilation. It's a feeling that just kind of sits with you, and it's really hard to really get past, in a sense, when you've put your mind around winning, and when you put your 8 weeks into the camp and you've been thinking about an outcome some kind of way, so that fear of losing that comes in. And sometimes whenever I do psychedelics, I have that feeling, like the same tug on my soul, that scary feeling, like, okay, what's about to happen? The anticipation of what's about to happen and not knowing what's going to happen. It could be good, it could be bad, but just not knowing what the next few hours held for me. That was an agonizing thing. I remember sometimes I'll be sitting for a fight and I'll be in the dressing room and I'll think about, what I'm going to eat after the fight, but then I'll like start getting nervous because I'm thinking like, oh man, I might not want to eat that because if I lose, I'm gonna feel nervous. And then I start going on the path of thinking about losing, and then it just becomes a whole mental storm. So, it has that feeling of losing and accepting that not knowing. That's the feeling. That not knowing feeling is what I feel when I do psychedelics, and that's the same one I felt as when I did MMA.
Yeah. So was there any like mental trainers? I've met two, like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu trainer out of Tempe, Arizona, I believe it was. His name is escaping me right now. And then there was Luca Senatori, who is an MMA mindset manager. Like, did you have any practices that, like, if you start going down that like dark road of thinking like, what if I lose type of thing, did you have any things to bring you back to center back then?
Yeah, I did. After I lost to Machida, my first time I ever lost, I was a belt holder, I was a champion, and I lost in the second round, got knocked out, embarrassing defeat. And I had a hard time accepting that. And then I had to fight someone almost a year later to the date in the same exact arena. And I was just having so much performance anxiety because I'm thinking like, what if it happens again? Like I'd never even been really hurt in a fight up until that point. And then after I lost, it kind of shook my confidence to the point to I thought like, maybe I just can't take a punch anymore. Maybe I just am not as good as I thought. So working past those issues, working past that whole thing was what I needed to do. So I had a psych coach. His name was Al Fuentes, and Al would do like these drills with me. Would do like these visualization exercises where I would just kind of put myself in the scariest positions that I was afraid of, and then find a way to work out of it. Just mentally speaking. And then after a while, he gave me the kind of the kind of verbiage I needed to say to myself when I was going down a dark path and things like that. So that helped out a lot.
Interesting. I feel like the world could use that right about now. Like some of this training,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What so the landscape has also changed. I know you're out of the game now, but like, so I've been chatting with this guy, Pete Barrett, and they call him Slippery Pete. And he hit me up. He said something about they're going to phase 2 in Boston. This was months ago, I guess. And I was like, man, I would love to come see you fight. And he was like, yeah, when the audiences come back, I'll let you know. And so I was like, okay, I guess phase 2 is a ring with no audience and streaming that, and kind of changing the name of the game. But like over the past couple of years, what have you noticed, like maybe the world and the circumstances, like how do you fit in? How have you had to deal to fit in with some of these changes, kind of more like what's going on in the world, how it's changing the game, and also even just business-wise, how you see yourself engaging with the future of where things are headed, all this technology, all the new changes. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a lot of the fighters, with everything that's going on in the world right now, I feel as if like they're more open and they're more honest about, how they're feeling in a psychological aspect of competing. I felt as if like now that veil, that cloak that fighters used to have to wear, that I'm the tough guy, I can't show my vulnerability, that's being shed a little bit with, some fighters really speaking out about how, their performance anxiety has hampered their performances, and how they're starting to get some kind of help and something, so they a competing coach, so they'll be able to compete at a higher level. But these are the conversations that make it easier for other fighters to really start to look at themselves and find a way to help themselves when they're finding themselves in a position of just that mental fog and not knowing what to do. As far as everything that's going on for me, with everything right now, I just been, just trying to take it one day at a time. With everything the way that it is, you just never know what world you're going to wake up in, and that's the sad and unfortunate part about today's time. I try to stay centered as much as I can, and that helps me, because there's only so much that you can change, and when you have a good grip on what you can change, you kind of leave whatever you can't, just to God, or, to the forces that be, to work out, and what's going to be is what's going to be. But having that station in yourself, not to cling to anything, is hard, and it takes daily practice. And sometimes I find myself where I'm just like clinging to things in my life, but then I realize the pain is in me clinging to it, Mm-hmm. And then once I just try to mentally let it go, then I start to feel better about whatever's going on.
Yeah, man, my mind wants to take me off in two different, directions, because one is, partly like what's happening in the world, what's exciting in the world, not just, in the total big sense of it, but also like, so the world of psychedelics is rapidly being thrown into the into industry. And that's just opening up a whole new world of like, they used to be about expanding consciousness, and like maybe they're still about that, but they're starting to get whittled down for people. And then on top of that, I was even thinking like on the professional fighting side, of things that I've heard for the longest time. I'm connected with a really cool guy, Carlos Reyes. He's got an amazing project, SparMat. It's basically Tinder for finding the best sparring partner. No, you don't date, but like you like matching up to the best attributes. Really, really cool. Like, can't say much more on that specifically, but then like one of the things that I've been hearing a lot are like, how are fighters treated in the sense of like, are they paid enough if they get like a career-ending knockout or something like that? You know, and maybe this is a sensitive topic, one not to go into, but like I'm kind of curious, like how could things improve for the fighting world to address maybe some of the shortcomings in there?
Well, I think when it comes to addressing some of the shortcomings as it pertains to just, facing yourself and dealing with that trauma that we experience in the cage sometimes when we have those embarrassing traumatic experiences inside the octagon, that a lot of fighters have a hard time just mentally competing after they have that I guess PTSD, and a lot of fighters have really, looked into plant medicine to try to find a way to try to get over that, and there's been some interest from the UFC to wanting to take a look and seeing if there's a role that psychedelics can play into helping some of their athletes with, with concussions and, those kind of psychological disorders or just, those anxiety points that we have as fighters to kind of help them, cope and deal with what we do. So that's a big step in the right direction when it comes, for the organization of UFC trying to make sure that the fighters are mentally on the same page. When it comes to the other aspects as far as, paying and stuff like that, there are some barriers that we still need to go through as fighters. But, for the most part, there are fighters that are making big money, and because there's fighters making big money, that allows other fighters to start, getting more money and things like that. And it's starting to trickle up in the right direction. But at the same time, there does need to be something a little bit more broad stroking for the average fighter. But as young as the sport is, these are all the things that are coming along the way. But to me, it seems to me that it's a good step in faith for the UFC to look into the direction in which a lot of these fighters really need, which is the mental aspect and what's going on with the brain.
That's a really good point. And I've heard Del Jolly from Unlimited Sciences talk about that. I believe he was one of the linchpins in that discussion, even getting to Johns Hopkins. Is that correct?
Yeah. Del Jolly with Unlimited Sciences was very intricate in making sure that relationship with the UFC and John Hopkins was made. So it was huge too, and with Del Jolly, he was, nurturing it up and make sure that he was handling it with care. So not to scare away people who don't have the experience, but just kind of talking to them and getting them to see what we already know about the medicine, and that's the thing about the medicine. A lot of times it comes with such a heavy negative connotation to it that a lot of people don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole until they really start to hear the stories of impact and how it's changed people's life, and they see the people that has changed. When people talk to me, they're just like, man, you seem so different than you were a few years back. And I just smile now, but at first I didn't really understand it because for me, I was just me, but I did change.
Yeah, well, it's cool because, Del, really good guy, Del acted as a bridge there for this just industry, this fighting industry, this in a good way, monster that's kind of growing in the fighting field, to consider plant medicines, this thing that's been around. It's age old. It has, some would say this is the original psychedelic because it's one of the only ones you could just pick up off the ground and eat it. When you're talking about psilocybin varieties, we're also finding out today, and again, Unlimited Sciences is great because Del's really a lot focusing on the sciences there. Psilocybin helps neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, which can actually, from what I'm reading and from what is being kind of, distilled down to my understanding, is that for people who have traumatic brain injury, this is one of the best interventions for what could turn out to be, sorry to use, who was it, Junior Seau from the San Diego Chargers as an example. Love that guy, love seeing him play, and what a tragic ending. And maybe there was other context than just head injuries, traumatic brain injuries, but thinking that something as simple as this mushroom that has been around for so long could also be one of the best interventions for an issue like that inside the brains and the neurons, then it's just really interesting that finally we're at an era where not only is it it's still Schedule 1, but is being decriminalized in many areas. There's Kevin Matthews with Vote Nature. He was in Denver, very instrumental in getting it decriminalized in Denver. That's a huge push. And then to see that the UFC is considering it, I would love to hear, like, how close are we to this? Is it already happening?
We still got a ways to go, and the UFC is still trying to figure out the ways to approach it with John Hopkins. So it is still like in the development stages, but just the simple fact that it's being considered is a huge deal. You're talking about the benefits of the mushrooms, and as an athlete who's taken so many concussive blows to the head and stuff like that, I gotta say, like, this medicine has done tremendous for me. I was gonna fight in New York, UFC 205, and I wasn't able to fight on the card because, medically speaking, the New York State said I was unfit. And then at that point, he said I was unfit because I had MRI came back and said I had some kind of issue with my brain. So that led to me having to do a bunch of MRIs and cognitive tests, which was probably one of the most annoying and hardest things in the world to do. I had to take 2 of them, and they're like 3 hours long. They're crazy hard to do. So I went in there and did that, and I went to Pittsburgh and met the guy from Concussion who was part of the movie, and who was, part of the whole information spearheaded CTE and that whole understanding of it. And he took a look at my brain, and, he seen what happened. And what happened, I had what's called the contra coup, is that, I hit the back of my head, but because I hit the back of my head at such a rate, it caused like a suction to the front of my head, and it pulled my brain back and it smacked it against the front of my skull, which caused a little bruising of the brain in the frontal lobe. So he told me that's not something that I did recently. It's something that I did a long time ago because he's seen in past MRIs. And at that point I was scared because as a fighter, I knew there was a chance of me having some injuries that may never leave me, but I never thought in a million years that it would happen to me right then. And at the time, the UFC told me that I might not never be able to fight again. So at that point, I really started to look at ways in which I can heal the brain. And once I started taking plant medicine, it has. I mean, I almost can feel it healing my brain, to be honest, man. And I don't want to go out and make claims that I can't scientifically prove, but it has done numbers for me on a cognitive level, and just it's helped my brain out so much.
That's amazing. That really is amazing. And it's hopeful to hear that there, because it's not just you saying it. Literally, there's tons of literature saying, and even people like Dan Engel and other people that are looking specifically at this, saying this really does look like it is helping people reverse a lot of the damage from concussions and traumatic brain injuries. I find that incredible. And I kind of want to go deeper into really just your fighting career and a parallel with psychedelics. A lot of people are kind of saying that there's this flow state, and sometimes people even microdose and use psilocybin or tiny slivers of LSD to help engage with flow states, but it's not even necessary. And I really want to ask, I guess that would be is that the flow state that you were experiencing when time would just slow itself down? Did it feel like things were effortless in that state? Because when it comes to Jamie Wheel, Stephen Kotler from the Flow Genome Project, they have this very specific idea of what flow is. And it's apparently similar to what HeartMath Institute calls coherence. It's where the brain waves, they shift a bit, and everything seems to just make sense. You lose sight of yourself. The task and the performer become the same event. It seems effortless. Michael Jordan, time slows down, and that slam dunk from the free throw line seems effortless because he's practiced it so many times. Maybe it goes subconscious, but like, I want to ask, like, have you had experiences like that before, ever having it induced by something you ingested?
Yeah, I've had many times in a competition where I've had that flow state happen, and it was almost like an out of body experience where
Mhm.
I'm just, watching myself perform, and I see everything coming, almost like 2 or 3 moves before it even happens, and when it does come, it's very slow. And even me, when it like when I'm in that flow state, I'll throw a punch, and it will go so slow. I'm just like, man, I'm feeling really slow today. So then I'll throw faster than that, and then I'm like, I need to pick up my speed. But then when I go back and watch the film, I was throwing like lightning. But to me at the time, it was just so slow in the flow
Yeah.
state. But in the flow state, it's the place where I want to be. Like I
Mhm.
would wait until the flow state happened, because then that's when Sugar can come out. Sugar was the performer. Sugar liked it. He liked to be in a flow state. Rashad Evans wasn't too much of a fighter, but Sugar loved it.
Isn't
Right.
that wild that, like, in
Yeah.
that kind of a scenario, you have time to think about your decisions and how you're doing, and you have time to critique yourself. Like, it actually slowed it down. I could imagine it even caused like a distance in some space where you're observing yourself going through these motions that most people, it's like, it'd be such an intense experience, but like, it almost sounds like there'd be a little bit of quietude there if you can sit there and ruminate about yourself while in the octagon.
Yeah, you're right about that. See, the thing about it is the fact that when you're in a flow state, you're not even thinking, and that's the beauty of it. You're just
Mhm.
reacting, and you're almost reacting in a state of like a sixth sense. Like you just kind of know what's going to happen, as if you got the script was going to happen, and you just kind of feeling it, and it's just there's no thought at all. It was just like you see it, you do it, or you see it, or you see it's about to happen, and then you're already on it without even a thought. And next thing you know, it's like, wow, I didn't even realize that I was even doing it. It's just like the training just takes over for you, and you just kind of sit back and just watch the show as if like you bought a ticket to the fight.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, the training thing. I've noticed, so musicians get into that state and they sit there and they noodle on the guitar, or they play in the drums, or like Pink Floyd, they play as a band together for countless hours until this seeming like epiphenomena. I think it was so in the Grateful Dead, they said, and then the music played the band rather than the other
Mhm.
way around. I
Mhm.
heard that from Charles Eisenstein, and it just makes so much sense. I've been in a band. I've felt those moments where just countless hours playing the same songs over and over again would give rise to these brief and fleeting moments on stage where there's thousands of people watching. The stakes seem pretty high. You mess up and thousands of people see it, and now there's phones, it's permanent. And because of that right mix of ingredients, these almost moments of magic where it almost seems the audience was in on it as well, like it couldn't have happened without all of them.
Right.
And that's like a merging with the room, the people around you. You sense your oneness, and maybe the audience also is so, enraptured by what's going on when they see like a divine move, one that's just like, oh, you could tell this guy is on his game, got the other one's number. There's just something that's clicking so right. You see the audience get up in arms, and they feel it, like they feel another aspect. And it's almost like, whatever is happening in the ring can't be held just by the people in the ring. It needs the audience to scream and yell and get it all out and bite their nails and stuff like that. Have you ever, like, I could imagine this is the same experience. I've been in some peyote ceremonies, and I've been in some circles and groups of people up to around 30 people with plant medicines, and I almost feel the same thing where, like with ayahuasca, it's a purgative. You purge, you throw up. And I've felt before, like, obviously, distinctly, I'm going through something personal and I got to purge. I got to get it out of me. I need some symbolic gesture to my body and to the environment, to just let that thing go. But then there's distinct times where I'm like, I'm not purging for myself. I feel like I'm purging either for someone in the room, or I'm purging for the planet at large. Like the planet at large can't maintain what's happening on it, or it needs its children to express it out and somehow like turn it into an expression to, get the release valve. And so, like, super curious, have you ever had those kinds of moments where you really felt, whether in the ring or whether with plant medicine, this unity, just with creation, not even just all humans, but just like everything is this one experience, and you find yourself at least aware that that's what it is while it's happening?
Yeah, right before I go into that place, when I get to that lock-in zone place, there's almost like a very quiet, subtle energy that I just start to just feel, and it just starts to I start to feel it connect and everything. It's almost a deafening quiet thing, where everything is loud, but then the loudness doesn't actually have sound. It actually makes things brighter, and things that are bright, as in visually speaking, they're loud to you, and then you're kind of your senses are kind of distorted in this state of just hypersensitivity, because they're so hypersensitive that they kind of almost blend into each other, and you start to hear the audience, but you're not only hearing the audience, you're feeling the audience inside of your chest, and you're just like, man, what is that feeling, And adrenaline is not all yours, because you're just feeling this crowd just feed into you. And then as soon as the curtains open up, you see the crowd just go crazy, and then that light just hits you. And for a second, your knees get so weak to the point where you can't even feel your feet. And you start stomping out your feet to kind of wake your legs back up, like, yo, this is happening, because the energy is just that raw. And as you walk to the cage, the feelings in your legs starts to come back a little bit, and then you start to remember what you're there for. But at first, man, that energy is almost can blow you over when you first open that curtain.
I bet, man. An interesting kind of like place to take this is, I'm curious your thoughts on technology. There's a lot of new technologies that are claiming like this thing, I forget what it's called, it's a pons or something. You put it on your tongue, it gives electrical stimulation to the brain, and it can help get you into the flow state quicker. Jamie Wheel from the Flow Genome Project talks about this with his like downhill mountain biking, and Navy SEALs were actually using this when they were like in complete darkness, underwater, having to hold their breath. And they would get disoriented if they would come up out of water without a feeling of where they were and how much they turned around. And so they had this electrical device that they would put on the tongue that would just like, if you feel the electrical impulse on the front of your tongue, that means go down. On the back of your tongue, it means come up, left, right. And it would help in a team navigate a dark, aqueous terrain all together. And it would take away the disorientation when they would come out. But then they also started finding that this simple technology was actually stimulating brain waves, allowing to get into flow states quicker for any activity that there might be. And it didn't have to be specific to sending you a left, right, down, up message. It was just this kind of fusion with the electricity of this device that you put on your tongue. So with that big explanation, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on technology, where it's going, its use in enhancing the human performance, and dare I say, like maybe even integrating and fusing with the human body?
I think technology, it does have its place and importance to an extent. I like that technology that you were just describing, because what it can do as far as like helping someone feel that feeling in the flow state. Because at the end of the day, like if you never know what that feeling is, then it may be hard for you to ever have that experience, because you don't know what you don't know what to feel. You don't know what you're looking for, But if you actually have that experience with a machine like that, or electronic device like that, then yeah, it can actually help your brain understand when you get, how to get there, or that state even exists. But I feel, at the same time, as great as technology is, I think that, I think that there does need to be a holdback on some technology when it comes to integrating it to the human experience, because, we're human in the aspect that we have this physical body, but we're not totally all human. There's a huge spiritual side of us that I feel society has, really pushed away and really not faced and really dealt with. Now we're just stuck in these 3D, these physical bodies as if this is who I really am. But when you go to the hospital and they check your body, they always check your electrical impulse. And that electrical impulse tells them how you really are doing. So in essence, you're really nothing but that electrical impulse. And when that electrical impulse leaves, the life leaves the body. So we have to really look at nurturing the spiritual side more than we're nurturing the physical side, because if we do not, then we're going to give rise to something that does not serve humanity.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, and I like the distinction because, most people's phones, let's admit it, we all use our phones, every single one of us, and we are augmented by our technology. We now, especially after, 2020, quarantine, we are experiencing more of the outside world coming through an electronic device. So it's augmented by technology more than we have any other relationship. Most people in cities, they see nature more through a screen than they actually touch it outside. They talk, text, email, FaceTime, all of our relationships are pushed through technology so much more than, unless it's your immediate family and you're looking at their face all day long, your phone is looking at your face more than your family is. Your family's phones are looking at their faces more than any other human. And this is a very, very interesting time that we're in. And I like the distinction that you made, because I kind of feel like there are some technologies that point us back towards, like they'll afford us an opportunity, but it's kind of that, are we using it as a crutch, or are we using it as like a stepping stone to launch us deeper back within, deeper into our potential, spiritually, physically, all merge into one at the top? And then there are some technologies that we don't know how to navigate without our phones. We don't really know what, other than like certain articles and kind of news feeds filtered through our phones, are going to tell us about what's happening in the world. It's an interesting time. And, honestly, a thought that I even had earlier today was there's this idea of the evolution of weaponry, and weaponry is always in relation to not just the individual warrior, like when all of a sudden when there were automatic weapons that changed the playing field. But you go back before that, like even just having a musket that you had to like load the powder and the and the pellets and stuff like that. That was high technology for the times. So I'm curious, like, where is the warrior going to go when technology gets to the point where AK-47s and semi-automatics aren't the most dangerous things out there? And even self-defense is something, I mean, we're in the digital era now. Like, what if there were a technology, and this was the whole thought experiment I had, what if there were a technology that, instead of not getting better at being a killing machine, was actually being better at like a harm neutralization machine, like Aikido? The whole point is not to knock the other person out. It's actually to neutralize the harm, to just bring it to a zero harm state. And I'm kind of curious, like, I wonder if technology could ever get to the point where it could actually reduce not even just the need, because then it gets into the should our guns be taken from us debate, but like light years beyond that, would guns become obsolete? Would talking face to face become obsolete because something else becomes so much more efficient? I know I kind of strayed pretty far from our original topics right there, but I'm curious because it comes up as the warrior. Like, what happens when that, or if that aggressive warrior, archetype doesn't breed and produce societally owned guns and weapons and ways to protect your own and your sovereignty, but it comes down to cybersecurity. Have you ever had those thoughts of like where the warrior goes once we all become cyborgs?
Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, I think we're getting pretty close there already as a society. Like, we still have the sports, the combat sports and things like that. But if you look at the combat sports, they're kind of changing. They're kind of changing a lot. And football and things like that, the rules and things are changing a lot. And it's a gentler game than it was back when it first started. And I think the same thing is going to happen with a lot of our combat sports, if we're even allowed to even have them, to be honest, just because of the fact that, the way society is right now and the way masculinity is being dismantled right now, it doesn't, bode well for the future of macho man things when you're looking at, the warrior. It's that's a thing of a past, and I think that is at some point is going to be looked at as a negative thing, to be that way, because it's going to be looked at as less civilized. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like the sensitivity of the world in general, just of the feelings and everything. People have really thin skin these days, and I think that thin skin is getting even thinner. People are getting offended by everything. So, I do think that the warrior one day will be trumped by this, the cyber, the cyber world, or the world that is fast approaching, because the truth of the matter is, it's happening right now, right in front of our very eyes.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope that, so I've totally seen the same thing happening in the sports world, where it turns kind of just like, whereas it used to be no holds barred, now it's some holds barred, like there's some things we don't do. And eventually, I always thought, where could war go if it wanted to get rid of aggressiveness? And it's always dancing, you know what I mean? And it always seems to come back to, is it a performance? Is it just like a kind of, what, I forget what that football player back in the day, he wanted to go and box Muhammad Ali, and they called that an exhibition, right? Yeah. It's they're not really sitting there trying to win a belt. It doesn't have the same stakes involved in it. But then when I look back, it's curious. You mentioned that I spent some time with the Lakota Indians, and it was such an interesting conversation with Basil Braveheart. And he was somebody who was helping the Lakota. He was an elder helping the Lakota who were dealing with drinking and alcoholism and stuff, with sweat lodges and the Lakota culture and stuff like that. And he told me the one time, he was like, because I think I asked him, like, what was war like, and what was violence and fighting like in the tribe before the colonists showed up. And he said, well, we fought a lot, and it was part of our culture. It just wasn't so like how did he say it? He didn't say despicable, but it wasn't so like intent on actually harming the person or harming, like even the sentiments of the individual. They would get into fights, and it was almost more like our wrestling. And I kind of wonder how much they would actually bloody each other up. But the reason why he was saying this was because he equated it to when boys are growing up and they want to wrestle and they want to fight, and their parents today tell them, no, we're not allowed to do that. It actually, in his opinion, it actually stops some kind of a process of being able to fully express yourself, and also the process of being able to take a punch and not it so completely disorienting you that it's, like makes you tune out, because they did have to contend with huge wild animals if they were on the hunt, things along those lines. And he said that, nowadays, children, especially young boys, they don't fight. And because of that, there's masturbation, there's worse and more insidious violence. And he pointed out a bunch of things, and he drew parallels between them. And that always stuck with me. I was like, I wonder what that actually does, if there was some real integral foundational level to, we used to fight. We used to be more brutish. But today, like, I wonder if a fight is the same thing as it was back then. And back then, you could settle your differences then. Nowadays, we're told it's illegal. You'll have to take it up with that guy in the suit with the gun, and that guy with the black robe behind the podium in the courtroom. That's who you're going to have to face if you get into a fight nowadays. And to me, I'm always curious what's happening to society. You mentioned the demasculinization of the male. I sense those things as well. I also sense like we're loosening boundaries of words, the family unit, gender.
Yeah.
We're starting to, and some of that is like, okay, can we not have the conversation? Of course we can have the conversation. But it raises red flags as to like, what are we preparing? What are we grooving into the ground to make, a flood for new? What do we demand as the people? I demand my government make blah, blah, blah illegal because I felt triggered, type of a thing. Like, and it's almost getting to this point where not only can't you, not that I would, but not only can't you just like settle your differences with a fight in public, but now it's getting to the point where you can't even say certain things. People are getting banned off of YouTube for things that just boggle my mind. So to me, it's almost like there's something about the cyber that is sabotaging even the good elements of the warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. Warfare now is different. It's more ideological. And it's ideological subversion that's the tactic that is used. And that's a gentler approach, but it's a much more effective approach because you hit people where they don't really expect you to, which is in their information source, and you catch them and when they're most vulnerable, where you're feeding them information, and then once you feed them the information that you want them to feed it to, then that information becomes their information, and they'll fight like a dog over that information as if it was their information, just because it's something that they felt pride in learning. So I think right now what we're experiencing right now in society is these ideological subversion techniques being put into schools, the over-sexualization of children, making them, make a choice on what sex they are, and just inappropriate things like that, that kids really shouldn't have a conversation for, at this point, just because they're children and children should be kept children. But, when they start to ideologically start throwing these things in the fire, then after a while, it starts to normalize concepts that really shouldn't be normalized for these children. But you teach these children this, when they get older, then they become your warriors. And then you've successfully converted these people over to your ideology without them even realizing that was your goal in the same time. And it came in as a Trojan horse. And that's what we have a lot. We have a lot of Trojan horse, destructful information that's being disseminated, and that's being allowed to, be set in the bedrock of who we are as a world, morally speaking, and as a country, morally speaking. America is being, pulled more and more away from, the Ten Commandments and the Constitution and all those things that really set the cornerstone, the foundation of what it means to be America. So, yeah, we're at war right now, but it's an ideological war that people don't really realize that we're in. And that's why, we're getting beat up.
Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. You say, there's something about a physical altercation, I should say. I'll get to the physical alteration part. The physical altercation part seems to be, there's something with the active use of your body. Like it's in the experience of your body. It's in the here and now here. And I kind of feel like, whereas back in the day, the threats back in the day were like a woolly mammoth, a charging bison, a cougar, another individual. It was very here and now. It was palpable. It was tangible. And nowadays it's, well, let's say 5 years ago it was, I'm late for work. I'm driving to work and I'm late for work. And we get the same stress hormones like it's fight or flight. And so it's not in the body as much anymore. And I kind of wonder if what you're talking about is is this progression into a cyborgian human 2.0. I'm really curious about where technology has taken us as a thing in general, because technology, whether you like it or keep it out of your house or not, it's becoming a part of our experience. It's how we get to the UFC. It's how we get to all the things that we like. It's how we find out about plant medicines. It's a very interesting thing, but it seems to be taking us out of time in a sense, and also out of our body, out of the experience of the here and now. And that's just the Ben Stewart, spin on it right now. But I'm super curious, like, where this is all headed and what you're talking about, like the changes in America, if that isn't by design, or if evolutionarily, even if you believe in evolution or whatever, whether it's destiny, manifest destiny, that is driving us towards a point where, like, humans will always, if you rewound evolution, it'll always replay itself back to making humans, and eventually humans will make technology and technology will supplant humans. But it feels like the freaking push, man. I've been reading about this stuff since 2005, the transhuman agenda and post-human, and what happens when technology is so much more of our experience than biology. And I mean, I didn't even expect to go there in this interview, but just thinking about like the fighting, it's your body. You're using what biology gave you. And then eventually imagine you have like a cochlear, this is cochlear implant and an ocular implant, and it tells you everything you need to know about the person in front of you, puts you into a flow state, and you get to diffuse something before it ever becomes physical. It's almost like we're heading straight into the Matrix. Does it feel like that to you?
100%. I mean, with the new technology that's being rolled out with the mRNA, that's an operating system. That's just the truth of the matter. It's an operating system. So with that operating system, no one knows what is truly in that operating system. So, it can be the beginning stages of the interface of, humanity and this transhumanism with the Internet of Things, which is going to be on the next few generations of our communication, 5G, 6G, and wherever it may go after that. But, that's going to be the basis of the Internet of Things, which is going to be what they're trying to have human beings interact with. Everybody's biometrics would be able to be uploaded on the Internet of Things with this technology that's going to merge man with human. And it is very concerning because, at that point when, you can merge man with technology, at which point does man stop being man? At which point do they stop being the creation of that magnificent force, that magnificence that encompasses all life? What does that mean to that magnificence? What does it mean to existence in general on a conscious level? And are we still able to consciously process life the same, if we start moving in this path of transhumanism? And these are some questions that people are going to have to really answer and really look at. But for the most part, I feel like, we as a world, we need to stop looking back and saying, I want to go back to how things were, and look at where things may go and where they're potentially headed, and realize that, this may not be a direction that we want to go in, or, whatever the case may be, but we can't make a solid assessment of the situation until we are willing to face what we have already lost.
Yeah, man. There's so much that brought up for me, and I'm glad you said it like that. Making an honest assessment. So like the warriors got to make an honest assessment of what they're facing. And, in the movie 300, those 300 soldiers had to make an honest assessment. Like, none of us are going home. You realize that we're going to start something, and, like, others are going to have to finish what we started. And I kind of feel like the world does need to, we need to see these things. And I really like the the best thing to do, you said it, is not go back to the way things were. It's kind of understanding that we need to move forward with a better understanding where we're going, which is what Aikido does. They don't turn back the hands of time to where the altercation never happened. They just move the energy. They're like, okay, I see what you're doing, but I'm only going to use it decentralized, what's the other one? Open source, what's good for the whole rather than good for the few. And what I like about it is, like, you used Instagram, or Instagram was the meeting place. It was city, or town square or city hall, of this virtual world where you met Del. And Del was able to, because of that, introduce you back to biology, which is the plant medicines. So like and in the plant medicine world, you call it communing with the spirits or communing with nature. And literally you're imbibing a plant. It's changing your perspective. It's almost like the plant is saying, let me show you the way I see things, but connected to the context of your own backstory. And so that's communion with the plant medicine, the plant world. I wonder if we've been communing with the technological, maybe not spirit, because some people would be like, no, there's a very clear definition of what consciousness is. Technology doesn't have it. Plants have had it to a low degree. We have it to a higher degree. And I kind of think, because we don't know how to describe whether the sun is intelligent and there's no science on it, most people on the safe side will just say, well, it's not intelligent. So I guess the point I'm driving at here is that we've been communing with technology since we started banging rocks to get a sharp edge so we could either put it on an arrow or make an axe out of it or something like that, and all the way up to Neuralink. All the steps from there to here, we've been fusing with it. It's become the thing that has made Homo sapiens the most like dangerous, dominant, artistic, very mercurial species on the face of the planet. I'm super curious if technology isn't something we've already been communing with. And I guess the reason why I say that, I don't want to super tangent this, but like I really like the idea of not looking at it as something we need to go back to the Stone Age, we need to erase how far we've come, that it might be a fix that's just closer to home. I don't personally like that there's all this infrastructure and satellites and cell towers and the Wi-Fi and the unknowns and the things that I can't put my finger on yet. I don't necessarily like it, but does that mean that I necessarily have to fear it? And so I guess where I'm going with this is that brings to me back to the artist, that one that it doesn't look at the external situation as the worst thing it could possibly be. It's the best possible thing wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a riddle of some sort. And I guess like that kind of brings me back to when you were stepping into the ring, you had to face some of the baddest guys out there. And you had to take that and somehow play with it. Did you ever feel like you were bringing play, the aspect of play, into the ring with you, to where like it wasn't this life or death, fight or flight, parasympathetic nervous system thing going on anymore, but you were actually, maybe not in a video game because that's not where I'm going with it, but you were observing yourself and you were just playing with what the options and the tools were around you?
Well, it's funny you say that because that was my whole fighting style, was to play. Like, I could never, like, I can remember the time in a fight where I actually got mad, and there was like maybe a handful of times where I was actually mad in a fight. But outside of that, it was all about play. I would be twisting my nipples. I'll be doing all kinds of stuff, clowning, talking to people in a fight, just laughing. And I felt as if like once I was able to compete from that position, I was much more creative. I was faster. I allowed myself to get into that flow state faster when I was just in that play state, and it's in that play state where it allowed me to remember why I did it. It was like always that little beacon of light, like a lighthouse reminding me, this is where shore is. And that's why I started fighting. It's like, you know what, you see this little beacon of light of play, always go to that beacon of light of play, because this is why you did it. This is why you started it. It's not about, the stakes at hand on this particular fight. It's not about the embarrassment that you may feel with the results of this fight. It's about just enjoying this moment and having a chance to do what you love to do, and that is play. And that's when I would tap into that. It was absolutely beautiful. But the parallel with that and medicine is this right here. You know, with medicine, with the plant medicine, it reminded me what I really was and what this really was, because it took me and broke the veil of consciousness where I got to experience my entirety of consciousness to the point where I realized that all I was consciousness. And it was something that I have long forgot about. And then when I had the plant medicine, it was like, do you remember? And I was like, oh, I remember. And it was just like, you know, like play for fighting, you know?
Yeah. You know, well, there's one thing I love about that is there's something about both psychedelics and play that have been seriously looked at in the reversal of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, neurodegenerative diseases. So there's this guy, Stephen Jepson, never leave the playground. He was 80 and he was like more balanced and coordinated than most people. He was constantly doing hacky sack on these balance boards, juggling, just doing different playful things with his hands and his feet. And he noticed that when he started training people over the age of 65 to regain their balance in these playful ways, that it stopped or halted and sometimes, according to him, started reversing the neurodegenerative diseases, which I don't know, like I'm making a huge leap here, but like when you start degenerating from the memory of how to even use your body, it's like you're forgetting who you are. And when you said play, almost reminds you why you did it. It reminds you almost of these soul kind of reasons why you even came to this earth, why you were gifted a body to begin with. I find that super interesting because psychedelics also are being looked at for their potential treatment of neurodegenerative diseases. And they also do this thing of reminding us. It's not like most people think like it's going to show you things you couldn't imagine. We say that sometimes, but to be perfectly honest, I've had more people tell me, no, psychedelics remind me where I come from. They remind me of my accountability, being the right kind of human, using my time wisely on this planet. And they also remind me like that ineffable, who am I? Like, what is it that I am not even here for, but what am I in general? And you kind of touched upon that. You realize you're pure consciousness. Man, I love that. I wish we could talk for 2 more freaking hours. What I would love to say, man, is I really appreciate your take, and in Psychedelica too. I really appreciated your take because a lot of the people that I've been getting to interview are the professional philosophers. And like that is their job. And this is no diss on them. They do incredible, very important work. But for the most part, it's people explaining from a more neurochemical or I serve this medicine type of a space. And I loved getting your take on it because it really reaches a whole new demographic. It shows that there are different applications than just the shamanic, spiritual, or the Johns Hopkins, quasi-pharmaceutical approach to these plant medicines. And that, to me, it really points out one interesting facet. Have we not even tapped what psychedelics are or could be? And are there other plants that we haven't even tapped their potential because we haven't gotten the framework of how to even look at them? Like, we didn't even realize that it could enhance flow wrestling and things along those lines and get you into the flow state until the word got out, until people started making documentaries and films about it and saying, hey, if you take this much psilocybin or this much LSD or whatever, and you go out and train, I noticed this kind of a thing. So I'm kind of wondering, like, where do you think all this is headed in terms of, because I'm going to even be on this LAMPS, it's the Los Angeles Medicinal Plant Society conference, and it's with Kyle Kingsbury, Paul Chek, Laura Don, Lauren Taus, Manesh Gurn, neuroscientists, other, athletes. You probably know Kyle Kingsbury, is that right?
Yeah. I know kind of Kingsbury.
Okay, cool. So like there's in that we're going to be talking about like different applications of the plant medicine, like how does it enhance massage? What about yoga? What about, cognitive and physical enhancements and things along those lines? And to me, I'm super curious about that. So what are you excited about when it comes to the plant medicines? What are you excited about seeing where it's headed? We all know that industry is taking a hold, and we all know there are dangers out there to anything that changes your consciousness or is a hot commodity. What are you excited about when it comes to plant medicines and where it could go?
Well, I mean, just from the therapeutic side, there's so many people, especially right now in the world, that are just suffering and really don't know a way out of it and don't really know how to gain the perspective in which they need to see themselves out of it, And I think that's one area that I know that the psychedelics can definitely help, because what it allows you to do, it allows you to get perspective. And normally speaking, there's really not a lot of things that can help you get perspective that you need when you're facing something in real time. You can talk to a therapist and they can say something to you that allows you to see things from a certain perspective, but you may have to go to the therapist every week in order to get reaffirmed on that perspective before it becomes your own. But when you use the psychedelics, you get that perspective as if time was passed, as if, you heard the best advice from someone super sage in your life and they gave you the perspective you need so you can see your problems. That's what you get in real time with the psychedelics. So I think as we move out of this this phase that we're in right now with everything around COVID and everything has been for the last year and a half or so, I think there's going to be a lot of people that that could use this kind of medicine and find ways to really adapt it to their life. And that's the thing that makes it, these mushrooms, whether it be turkey tail, whether it be lion's mane or reishi mushrooms or whatever, these are adaptogens. They're going to give what your body needs. It's going to give you what exactly your body's calling for. And, for me, taking these medicines completely have changed my diet all the way to my habits on a daily basis and almost every aspect of my life. And I know that once people starts to, get more information and it starts to shatter the negative connotation that you have around the medicine, the more people start trying it and seeing ways in which it can, adapt and help them out in their lives.
I love that. And that brings up thought experiment. If I were to go to your supplement cabinet and open it up, and you don't got to get into brands, but I would love to know, because you mentioned all these different kinds of mushrooms, these non-psychoactive or psychedelic mushrooms that are super good for the body. I would love to know, whatever your top 3 or your top 5 favorite things that you take, especially if you can name them by just the plant that you take.
Mm-hmm. I take the lion's mane, of course. That's one of my favorite ones to get my brain going in the morning. And then I take this, it's kind of like a gooey plant mass. It's called shilajit. It has fulvic acid and it has humic acid. And it's super, super good for you because, with fulvic acid and humic acid, it helps your energy level really well. It helps your clarity, your mental clarity. It helps also with the electrical impulses in your body. So it helps your body communicate better, and it's like a neurotropic a bit too. And the third thing I use is haritaki. Haritaki is what I use at nighttime, and I use that to pretty much. It's like the janitor crew. I take it at nighttime after I finish all my food, and I go to bed, and it just cleans out my intestines, my digestive tract. It cleans out my blood. And then when I wake up in the morning, I have a movement, but then I'm starting off with a clean stomach and I have good gut bacteria. And not for nothing, this haritaki, it adds 300% more oxygen to your brain because, once you start treating your stomach, you start to increase your brain out, your oxygen level in your brain. So you have like once it's getting to your body and once your system starts getting pretty clear, you get like a crazy buzz from it. It's really hard to explain, but those are the three that I consistently take and try to use on a daily basis.
Awesome. Anything with the microbiome, any kind of like probiotics, prebiotics, things like that?
So, well, the Harataki, it kind of acts like a prebiotic,
That's
probiotic,
right.
because it cleans out your stomach really good, and that's what I'm really big on. I'm really big into to gut health, or to any supplements that helps really clean out the body. Sea moss is another one that I use. That's really, really good. And we as society, we're used to consuming, but it's almost as if like we don't realize that everything that we consume, we have to get rid of. We have to. It has to be it has to get out of the body. So we really need to pay attention to what mechanisms are we using to help us, to aid the body in getting out these things. And why I say you need something to help aid the body, because we're taking in a lot of time things in a body that's not meant to be there. So naturally it gets caught in the body because it's not supposed to be there. So your body has a hard time of deciding on, should it be there or should it not be there? And it gets caught in the organ. So when you start taking these detoxing elements, they find a way to pull it out the body. And once you're able to pull out these toxins out your body on a consistent basis, then it makes it easier for your body to not have those big shedding seasons like we have when it comes to the fall and things like that. And then you get sick, So if you can find a way to detox on a consistent basis by using something that helps clean your body, then it helps with your shedding process, and it helps you not get sick when it comes to the fall and things like that when the sun goes away.
Yeah. Diet is so huge. It's interesting. One of the last things I want to ask, is we're talking about eating and what we feed our body again, and coming back to like biology, because we eat of biology, not yet. We don't eat technology. Well, actually, no, I take that back. FDA approved, smart pills. You take them. And so, but when I'm saying that is, when you hit the plant medicines, did they have a message for you about how you should feed yourself?
Yeah, one of my biggest trips I ever had, I actually had the mushroom. It was almost as if like I felt my humanity, as if like whatever I truly am got to feel my human body. And then it was kind of like talking, like I was talking to myself, and it was saying like, this body. And it was like, you feel like ish because you eat trash, you eat dead food. You feel like death because you eat death. And it said if you continue to eat death, you will become death. And it said if you want to have life, you have to eat life. And when it was saying this to me, it was as if like, it's really weird, is because only like people who really have been in the medicine world would know what I'm talking about. But outside of this conscious experience, as far as me being Rashad Evans and my ego, there is this knowingness that just lays outside that consciousness. And once you're in that state of medicine, you have like this knowingness just kind of I guess just download information right into your psyche, as if like it's your thoughts and you thought them for eternity, and it just come into your mind as solid concrete facts. And I was just getting these solid concrete downloads of why I shouldn't eat meat, what it was doing to my body, and all these different things. And when I got done with that experience, I was like, wow. I told my boy Dell, who was there with me, I'm like, man, I had this experience. Like, it was telling me like I shouldn't eat meat anymore. But it was like really, really like pushing that I need to stop eating meat. And right after that experience, I just lost my taste for meat. And it would get to the point where I would eat something that was meat and I want to throw it up right away, to the point where I just lost the complete taste for meat, and I just stopped eating meat altogether.
What's interesting is because, so there's this societal aspect, and through the internet, the vegan movement. And I really have to say, I'm going to say a couple things about the whole vegan movement. One is the manner of communication doesn't always come from the most graceful and the most educated of them. It comes from the most passionate. And this is not like a knock or a slam, but it's one thing becoming a vegan because somebody tells you, like, from a moral standpoint, ethical standpoint, or something along those lines. It's almost like you don't get the message that way. Almost as you were saying earlier, it has to come from this. It comes from within. Almost like in the plant medicines, the way you know things is you feel the knowingness of it. It's not somebody else trying to do inception and plant the seed in your brain to make it you think it was yours. It's like a mirror of yourself. So I find it interesting because plant medicine did the same thing to me. And I've gone back and forth with this. I can't say that I haven't eaten meat over the past few years, but it's the one group, it's the one argument that I constantly see the argument of, and I'll always, kind of be like, I get it. If I'm defending people's ability to eat meat, there's the same arguments that come up, like, so you're willing to end the life of something else to keep yours going. And to me, that argument, like, coming from people, it always just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, to be perfectly honest. And I have to be humble and grounded when I say that. But when medicine told me, it was like the next day, I'm like, done. Like, because it was me saying, Ben, you can't even listen to the lessons of life that you're looking for with all that noise in your body. You need to clean your body. You need to clean the instrument so it can do what that instrument is meant to do and vibrate at that frequency, because it's not just that, like, you're meant to as a human. Ben, you're looking for something specific, and I'm telling you, you're not hearing it because of these things in your body. And it wasn't just meat. It was also the overdoing of cannabis. It was the, underdoing of spending playful time with my family. So there were several forces in it, but I find that interesting that it was the medicine, and it was just after that you lost your taste for it. So, like, I saw that movie Game Changers right before you and I met. And I remember when I met you, I was like, your story should have been in that film, in a sense. And not saying that's the film to end all films. It was an all right film coming up with all right science and stuff like that. But, like, your story really kind of, it hit the nail on the head for me in what caused me to make that change and really start listening to my body in different ways.
Well, I mean, that's good that you even listen to your body, because some people will have that and just be like, ignore it or push it to the side. But to really pursue it and really start to do it is something else. And that's what I thought I was going to have a hard time doing at first when I first got into it. But after a while, when I was doing it, it just became so easy to do, But for me, like once I started to take that path and listen to the medicine, it was like, it was almost as if, like, things were just opening up for me. And I kind of felt as if, like, it was something that I needed to listen to, because I had a similar experience right after I did the Toad. And the Toad, it was kind of like, there was something about the Toad experience that told me that I don't need to drink alcohol anymore. And it was like, it was the perspective in which I had afterwards that I couldn't even stomach alcohol anymore, and I haven't drank ever since. So the medicine, it changed me for the better, like a better version of who I am. And it was not even something that I was sitting there trying to do. It was just something that just kind of happened as a consequence of really just going that deep and really discarding and facing myself in ways that I never faced myself before.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up with drinking. Drinking was the same thing for me. I think I've probably had a beer and a shot in the past 5 years, maybe a little more. And it's because I never ended up quitting. It stopped appealing to me altogether. And cannabis was one of those things that I was just overdoing it. And then I put it into this box of, okay, I can't do it anymore. And I was just on this huge family road trip. We were out in California, and when in Rome, So I dipped my toes back into the water, and I'll tell you, this is not a stretch. It's not an exaggeration. It reminded me of what being a good parent is. It reminded me of what going on vacation is meant to do for your soul. It reminded me of so many things. And then I thought, like, oh, so it's balance again. Like, I've read that book before. Like, I should have known this, but it's just kind of funny how, like, because that's another plant medicine, the endocannabinoid system is dominant inside our body, and not that cannabis is the only way to touch that system. The runner's high touches that system, but it really is balanced. So, like, before we leave the audience, I just want to, like, from a professionally trained athlete to somebody that's moving deeper into the world of consciousness, what kind of words of wisdom can you leave people that want to explore consciousness, they want to be more in their body? Maybe it's psychedelics, maybe it's not. What's some words of wisdom for you, for guidance for people that are looking to take some kind of experiential next step in this direction?
I would say, do not be afraid to face your deepest fears. And the truth of the matter is the fact that what you think are your deepest fears it's probably not really your deepest fears. A lot of people tell me, like, they're afraid to try psychedelics because they don't want it to, bring out a side of them, that they find unfavorable. But the truth of the matter is, what you think in your conscious mind has nothing to do with what the medicine is going to bring out. And that's something that I found out personally. So, go into it with an experience of open-mindedness and just a willingness to know that whatever comes out on the other side is what you specifically needed. And I don't want to make it seem as if, like, only using psychedelics is the only way to tap into this higher sense of consciousness, because it most certainly isn't. But the reason why I speak on psychedelics and why it is a valuable tool, because in the Western world, we've become so inundated with so many different things that it's kind of dulled our sensitivity, and it kind of taken away the splendor and wonder of existence, to the point where when we talk like this, it kind of seems like foo-foo, wishy-washy, not real stuff, and a lot of people who are, they're very into the world, meaning the fact that all the materialism that the world possesses, this conversation wouldn't appeal to them, But once you realize that, outside of that paradigm, there is a subtleness, there is an energy, there is an existence that is bigger than the world that we think, is so big, and that the world that we created is really just inside of the world that already exists, or the realm that already exists. And these plant medicines allow us to feel that it's real, but there's ways to really do it once you understand that the consciousness is there. Once you understand that, once you feel that stillness, and there's a stillness that you feel when you use this medicine, that's a very familiar stillness. And once you feel that stillness, you can go inside all the time, and you don't even need the medicine, but the medicine helps you understand that it's even there. So I would say explore, be smart, be safe, but most importantly, have faith and believe that, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. So familiar with that stillness, man, whether it be in an ice bath, that strange stillness and the intensity of that experience. Man, breath work, just, anything where the stakes seem high, or it's just radically a different experience. It always seems to bring up stuff that we need to face. So I like that, face yourself. Don't be afraid to face your fears. They're there as teachers. They're not there as enemies. And you're right. You will be okay. You're going to be fine. You will come out better on the other end if you make that stand and have the courage to face your fears, especially in a group and around professionals that know how to keep you safe and allow for you to understand this is also play. You can play in these realms as well. Yes, you got to face some hard stuff, but you have to do that if you want to learn rock climbing, So Such a beautiful message, man. I think that's such a great place to wrap it up. But I want to ask, what are you engaged in right now that you want the world to know about? Just tell people where, how they can, find more out about whatever it is. If you want them contacting you, give them a way to contact you. But if it's more about like, people, listen up, there's this thing happening. Just lay out what you're excited about, what you have going on right now for the audience to engage with.
Well, I'm excited that I'm working alongside with Unlimited Sciences. We were speaking about that earlier. And Unlimited Sciences is, really trying to help people and share their psychedelic experiences. So then that way, when we go and we work with Johns Hopkins, we'll have a better idea on where to devote the research to so it can be more beneficial. But more importantly, we want to develop a database so it helps people to understand, what other people's experiences are and where they can best get, whatever they're trying to achieve out of the medicine, the plant medicine, and just trying to, compile so much data. And that way, it really is a tool to help out people in navigation so they can speak out to people who have experience with these modalities so they can help themselves out. Where we are right now in the world is tough, and we have some tough days ahead of us. And I truly believe with everything inside of me that, these are the medicines and the modalities that bring us back to one, and bring us back to that connection in which we all forgot, no matter what race you are, no matter what culture you come from. The truth of the matter is that we're all so much connected, closer than we can even ever imagine. And it sounds crazy, it sounds corny to even say sometimes, but the truth of the matter is that that's just the reality of the situation. But it's something that we've all forgot about. And I truly hope and I truly aim that I truly hope and pray that these modalities, find people and really start to bring this human family together so that we can remember what we are and our children can have better tomorrows than we've ever had. So that's my hope and that's my prayer. You can find me on Sugar Rashad Evans on Instagram. Send me a message, I'll write back, or whatever you want to do. I'll be there. But Ben, I want to thank you. Appreciate you and your time, and I love it. I love our conversations.
Yeah, man, this has been a doozy. I only have 2 words to sum up what we talked about, and that's holy shit. I love it, man. I really love this conversation. I thank you so much for your time. That was unlimitedsciences.org, and then Sugar Rashad Evans on Instagram. Please go and check out what Rashad's got going on, what Dell's got going on at Unlimited Sciences, and just get in the know and try to be good to one another. We are a human family. Thank you for the reminder there, Rashad. And for the audience out there, just remember to live from the heart and keep coming back and checking out what we got to say. We're going to try and bring you as much consciousness expanding content and media as possible. So I'll just leave it at that. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.